Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to part 2 of Rush. Cranked and Ranked is the podcast you're listening to. I'm assuming though, if you're listening to part 2, you've heard part 1. Because if you're starting at part 2, that's weird.
Yeah,
maybe that's just weird in my head.
Out.
You know, some people don't abide by everybody else's rules, but I'm one of those people that I'm really weird about. Like, you know, there's been times where people have been like, "Oh, let's go see this movie. It's part 2 of this movie." I'm like, I didn't see part 1. I can't possibly go see part 2.
I'm the same. Yeah.
There's no way. I'll have to somehow cram it in before we go to the part 2 movie. Anyway, yes, Cranked and Ranked podcast where we rank. Well, we crank things first and then we rank them. Hence the name. Very clever, right? And yes, Rush part 2 of our
whose idea was that?
That was Mr. Eddie Sparxx out of his genius brain. But the second part of our trilogy of Rush album ranking episodes. Last time, if you were with us, we did the lower third, which was the bottom 7 Rush albums, and right now we're right smack in the middle. But I mean, we're already in territory of albums that I'm just like, this might as well be a gigantic top 10 that happens to have 12 albums in it.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But so yeah, we're going to be doing number 12 down to number 7, the 6, right smack in the middle. I wore this shirt today. My propaganda shirt, because I decided I wore my Rush t-shirt last time. This time I'm wearing the shirt of my second favorite Canadian band, which is Propaganda. So
nice.
I thought I'd give them a little bit of love, because you know,
I threw on a Faith No More shirt because it was the top of the pile.
I mean, it's a great shirt. Anyway, so yeah, so I don't know. It's weird whenever we do these multiple parts. Whenever we have a middle episode, I'm always like, okay, because it's not really like there's no grand beginning or this is the conclusion. This is the middle. Welcome to the middle, everybody.
The middle.
What is zone. What was that great line from Almost Famous, where the kid's talking to what's his name, Lester Bangs, and Lester Bangs is all like, you know, you're the star of your school, and the kid goes, "They hate me," and Lester Bangs goes, "You'll meet him again on the long journey to the middle." And I always like that line. A lot of great lines in that movie. Anyway, I'm having a drink out of my Cranked and Ranked coffee mug.
Yes. Merch. Now, in the link you're about to say.
No, I'm not gonna. No. People aren't buying shit, and I'm a little bit mad right now, so I'm not even gonna talk about it anymore. We have merch. This is part 2 of Rush. I say we just literally just jump right into it. You know, like, don't even test the waters this time. It could be really fucking cold in there, but we're just gonna jump in anyway. Because, you know, YOLO, as the kids say. YOLO. They don't say that anymore. Nobody says that anymore. Isn't that weird? Like, sayings come and go so quickly that you know, there was a big thing around YOLO, and now nobody says, "Oh, I say it." You know, I'm bringing it back.
My favorite, like, it's a word that is already a word, but it's become something of a slang way to just like pass off anything now that you don't like. I am thrilled that the word cringe can just be like said now. Like just you can do a cringe. like you don't have to precede it with, "Oh, that was pretty cringy." You can just go cringe, like, and it's just the funniest shit in the world. And I like it
because it's all about, you know, evolving to where our dialogue will become all one word sentences all the time.
Yeah.
Speaking of one word, Rush. And so let's
Yes.
jump into starting at number 12, going down to number 7, the middle. But these are all fantastic. They're all fantastic albums. If you didn't listen last time, one, that's weird. Two, it was a love fest, even in the bottom portion of the ranking. So it's good. That's going to continue. So without further ado, throwing it over to Eddie Sparxx for his number 12 Rush album.
Cool. So my number 12 Rush album is Counterparts.
All right. This was actually in my bottom third, but let's jump into it.
I like this is arguably the heaviest album they did from a guitar for guitar moments, you know.
Yeah.
Animate is this like badass big guitar driven rocker, like from the very end of the 80s hard rock production era. Like there is still a very roomy reverb sound, but it does have a lot as well in common with like it doesn't sound grunge, but it sounds like a grungy take on what Rush do.
Yeah.
And as we all know, the 80s weren't completely gone until 93, 94 anyway. So, but yeah.
Are they ever really gone?
Nah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe 95, but we don't talk about him. So, yeah. Then you get Stick It Out. Like, this is tasty. What a tasty song. Super heavy. Cut to the Chase is this groovy rocker. Nobody's Hero is this kind of solemn ballad track that deals with some like, you know, dark personal subjects. It's kind of a tearjerker of a song.
Yeah.
Between Sun and Moon, rocking track. Rush doing big hard rock. You know, I'm all for it. I'm all for them having a core thing that they are, but also pulling from different areas. And to think, like, I find this transitional period of Rush really interesting because it's like you can hear that they didn't completely reject synthesizers when the 90s were coming around. Like, Presto brought the guitars back into the fray a bit more prominently. Then you had Roll the Bones, obviously, which also still had synthesizers on it, but was again guitar and synth playing off each other. But this one's just like, we're in the rock zone, let's fucking go. Alien Shore is this funky kind of rock vibe. Speed of Love is this vibey hard rock one. Double Agent is really cool. Leave That Thing Alone, instrumental. A sequel to Where's My Thing, perhaps? Because they're both instrumentals and they both have thing in it.
That's true. Yeah.
And one came after the other, so I couldn't help but feel like, where's my thing? Leave that thing alone.
One of those really massive Rush fans that's nerdier about it than me would probably know the answer to that question.
I took a few trips to Reddit, and I'm not the only one that noticed it, but
okay.
Yes. So, where was I? Cold Fire has one of my favorite chord progressions in it. Very nice too. Everyday Glory, cool closer. I would say, it's a damn good hard rocking record. There's if you like heavy riffs and stuff, they do pop out on this album, and yeah, I think it's a really cool record, but I think there's ones they did that feel more cohesive and focused while also being like mind-blowingly expansive. So as a result, Rush doing something of a stripped back rock take on their sound is interesting.
Yeah.
Still did some great songs, but they have done admittedly even stronger stuff, which is incredible. But
Yeah, and it's interesting because I mean, a lot of bands did that. A lot of bands did that sort of return to rock thing around the
Yeah.
same time, and it's easy to say that it's bandwagon jumping because grunge and more simplified rock sounds got popular, but that I think it's connected to that, but in the way that all of a sudden these bands were touring with some of these bands and seeing these bands live and getting that sort of rejuvenated sort of feeling of like, oh, we used to rock. That would be
Yeah.
fun. And so, I think that it was just that sort of thing where, the idea of just being a rock band and the production value of being able to bring across a heavier sound much better, all came together. And
Mm.
so, Rush, you utilize that on counterparts. But you know what? You make a good point though about them competing with their own shit. Because I think that the thing that is the most frustrating, I don't know how they felt as songwriters and performers and the people who created the albums. I'm assuming it's a little bit frustrating, but from a fan perspective, having to organize these, the one that comes in at my number 12, it's a perfect example of me going, this album's fucking great. Unfortunately for this album, they did all these other albums that are fucking amazing. And so it's like, it's one of those unfortunate things. And so, you actually talked about this one on the last episode, but I'll throw in my 2 cents here. My number 12 is Caress of Steel from
Hey.
1975. Now you made the point that I think everybody makes, which is the track listing, the sequencing it seems very uneven, especially in this day and age, just listening to it all the way through and there's no sides. Because
Yeah.
it kind of makes sense sidewise because you have a couple simple songs and then you build up to a big ass song at the end of side one, and then side two is one big ass song.
Yeah.
And that's cool because honestly, like I do like that aspect of it, but there is a part of me that thinks that it's a bit uneven because of that, but it's only because the songs that lead up to it, because you start off with a big ass rocker with Bastille Day,
Yeah.
and then what's it? I think I'm going bald, and then Lakeside Park, which both of those kind of bring they're both rocking in their own ways, but it's a weird sort of dip, and then you go back up to the necromancer kind of thing, and
Yeah.
I kind of thing, that long epic song kind of thing. But I think the reason why I ended up putting it this low, because I really enjoy this album and I think it's really cool and pretty underrated, really, as a Rush album. But I also understand why it wasn't successful,
Mm.
especially coming from Fly By Night, which for the most part was your average 3 to 4 minute rock song kind of thing. Obviously, way better written than what they had previously done and better than most rock
Mm.
bands at the time. But then they followed up with this, which is a little bit more to wrap your head around, especially if you're just a teenager listening to music in the 70s,
Yeah.
Also, to me, it comes across as kind of transitional because I really do feel like with their debut album, they had their sort of standard rock kind of things they were doing, and then Fly By Night, Neil Peart comes in, and everything seems to get stronger at that point where it's like almost like they improved on what they were already doing, and then gave us a little bit of taste of the sort of epic proggy shit that they would end up doing.
Yeah.
And then Caress of Steel is them leaning into that, but it's almost like it's like they're pushing boundaries. But if you listen to the big old epic tracks on this album and then you compare them to what they would do later, these are a little bit clunky at times.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is an odd album, but it's a really cool one to me. But at the end of the day, it's just competing with other Rush albums where they just continually outdid themselves album after album. And I think this is a really important album because of the transitional nature. Because I think they got way more comfortable because they needed to have a fuck it kind of moment to get where they needed to go. And so the record companies are all like, no, we want you to turn in eight to 10 songs, 3 to 4 minutes long rockers. And they're like, fuck that. Even if this means that we get dropped from our label, have no tour support, and the band just goes broke and we can't continue to do this anymore, fuck it. And so, the ultimate fuck it is one we haven't talked about yet. And that one ends up paying off for them. But this one really did have a fuck it kind of vibe where they just said, here's where we want to go, and let's just see what happens. So I think that aspect of it, it's like their confidence, they really figured out that they were a lot more about their integrity than they were about making money or holding on to fans that just wanted one thing to be the same all the time. So in that respect, Crest of Steel is a very important album, but like I said, they blew this album out of the water many times over, in my opinion. And so it goes at number 12, Caress of Steel.
Cool. So my number 11 is Presto.
Yay, another one from my lower half or lower third.
See, this is like the beginning album of their another transitional record for them, where they had kind of peaked where they could go with the synth stuff. So they brought the guitars back a little bit, but still kept the synths there. The production is very very, very late 80s, like almost hair metal sounding production.
Yeah.
I love that. I know it's quite a divisive thing, but I'm a huge fan of that. Show Don't Tell, like this does showcase something of a return to some guitar driven rock oriented stuff, like despite still being very 80s from a production perspective. Chain Lightning has this like mischievous feel like to it, like sounds kind of cheeky, sneaky, clean guitar parts. The Pass is a beautifully crafted song with the bass, guitars, and synths all coming together. Warpaint again has an almost hair metal chorus, and I love that because for a band that, here's the thing, like their 80s records, a lot of bands from the era that Rush began in would go in sort of if they hadn't broken up, they would go into they would do at least one hair metal album. Rush never really did that. They kind of straddled this line between like at points I found they sounded like a hard rock version of The Police at points in the
absolutely
80s.
Yeah.
Like I got that vibe a lot. But like to hear them have like a bit of a balls out kind of fuck yeah hair metal-y moment, I'm all for it. Scars is still very rooted in the 80s. Presto feels like a 70s Rush song with an 80s coat of paint. Superconductor, that riff sounds like if Helmet were a 70s boogie rock band.
I love the way you say boogie.
Yeah, that's what I call a right fucking boogie.
And all the children boogie. Right.
Oh man, Anagram, really like the equality of the guitar and the synth on this one. Red Tide, it's got a bit of a brief but pretty ripping solo from Alex Lifeson in that one. It kind of goes a little bit shred mode.
I've always liked, like, Alex Lifeson is one of my favorite guitar players, and I think it's because he does really cool shit, but he doesn't seem like what he does doesn't seem unattainable. There are rock gods where you go, there's no way I'm ever gonna fucking play that. I figured like a lot of what Alex did throughout the career of Rush, none of it was I mean, some of it was pretty difficult. But for overall, he seemed like a real sort of like he's an everyman guitar player who happens to have really cool ideas to go on top of these songs. And so I would love it when he would do these killer fucking solos where you're just like, out of nowhere, some shit would come out of him. But he was also really good at doing like the slow burn guitar solo where he'd build this shit up and he'd hit those little tasty notes. I mean, the dude, I mean, still is a great guitar player. But I just, I feel like he's a little bit underrated because, I think, Geddy and Neil get a lot of the attention. I mean, there's even like a great scene in the Beyond the Lighted Stage where Alex and Geddy are in like a cafe or something, and somebody comes up to Geddy to ask for his autograph, and Geddy's all like, "Do you know who this guy is?" And like, "No." It's like, because like really, if you think about it, like Geddy is a very recognizable person, and Alex, he's just a white dude. So
it's funny. Like, I find that, like, if there's a lot of situations where I've seen like if the bass player is the front man, the guitarist is fucked. Like he's like, damn it.
It is funny because like I start thinking of other bands like that, and I go, wait, okay, who's the guitar player in the Police? What's his name? I don't know what his name is.
Oh, dude. Yeah, it really do be like that though. But yeah.
Sorry, I did put in my 2 cents about Alex because I love listening to him play.
Yeah, he rips, but he only does it when like you're least expecting it.
It's tastefully done always. It doesn't. He doesn't seem like he's hogging a spotlight ever.
It's funny actually. I've got here somewhere. I'm sure I made a note of it. There's a song. I'll probably get to it down the line. But there's like one Alex Lifeson solo where I hear like a fucking Kerry King lick in there, and I'm like, you just played part of a fucking Slayer solo, but made it make sense. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. Where was I? Hand Over Fist. Pretty bombastic guitars on this one. Available Light is a very grand sounding track to close out on. It's a transitional and underrated album, in my opinion. But yes.
Yeah. Awesome. So my number 11, we're moving back a little bit from that. Not too far, though. This was one that battled for position and was higher and then lower. And just like last time, I got to a point where I was rearranging things so many times that I just had to leave it because it's ridiculous. But this is a fantastic album. My number 11 is Power Windows from 1985. It's their 11th album, and they're well into 80s Rush, the 80s Rush era at this point. In fact, like I would say that if anyone came to me and said, what's the best example of the most 80s sounding that Rush ever got, I would probably go for Power Windows because it's the keyboards are, I think, out of every album, I feel like they're the most prominent on this one. I feel like they are insane. I mean, they're great, but it's almost like the thing about Power Windows is that, Rush was always experimenting with stuff. At this point, the experimentation is all through synths, and it's not just synthesizers like keys. They add sampling. There's like sampling and shit going on. And that's a really important thing to point out too for people that aren't really familiar with Rush and how they worked as a band on stage, because a lot of groups that you'll listen to their album and you'll hear guitars, bass, drums, vocals, and then you'll hear keys and these other things, and you'll go, oh, it's really cool. And then you go see them live and none of that shit is there. Rush, on the other hand, they were literally using all of their limbs. Alex and Geddy would play keys with their feet, these big ass, things. Sometimes it was a preset kind of thing. Sometimes it's actually playing just long notes of stuff. But so Geddy would have his bass, microphone, sometimes turn over to a keyboard over here. Sometimes be playing something with his feet while he's playing the bass and while he's singing. And then of course you have Neil, like we said last time, has the shit all around him and he's bling bling blong everywhere. And like, so it's just one of those things where like there are occasions where they do have to leave something out of a song, but for the most part, they break their fucking necks trying to make sure that they can recreate things. And so you get to this point, like Power Windows, where there's the sampling and the keys and all of that shit. And it just becomes like, it's almost like Geddy Lee's science experiment trying to make everything work on stage. And then of course he brings Alex into it, because you see Alex hitting some keys with his feet every once in a while too. And that's just fascinating to me. But I feel like the fun of Power Windows is that the fact that they were embracing technology and like, what can we do? What toy can I get and use on this album? Let's get that. And on top of that, this has got a lot of great songs, marathons on this fucking album, which is a fantastic song. There's a lot of great songs on this album. It's a really solid album. Now, for this album, I compare it to what we were saying about Hold Your Fire, where I feel like the vibe is kind of samey, not with the actual songs. Like there are great songs on this, but I feel like it kind of gives you there's one direct sort of goal they have with this particular album, and it plays out through to the end. And once you've gotten 2 or 3 songs in, there's nothing that's like super surprising aside from, if you were listening to this in 1985, possibly the sampling, and some other things, some other choices here and there. So for that respect, I ended up putting it at number 11, because I'm like, this is a really great album all the way through. But once again, I had to start using my banger calculations and being like, how many times do I go, oh, and it's less on this than on the ones we're going to get to. So while I think this is a great album, I feel like this one, I think people that like 80s Rush love this album, but I think overall this is one that just fits right in the middle, where some people just go, they lost me after whatever album. And I feel like Power Windows is in that area, the no man's land for some people, where it's like, no, we don't go there. But it's great. It's a great album, and that's why it makes it here at number 11. Power Windows. Remember that? Nice. Remember that? It's so weird. Like that's a phrase that doesn't really mean anything anymore, because all cars have power windows now. Whereas back when I was young, you had to fucking roll the window up or down, and you just unlock. Now you just unlock the fucking car from your keychain, and you just push a button to start the car. And you're in the future.
Hell, but even I, born in 1998, remember roll down windows, at least in the back. Yeah.
And you know what? And cars back then, that was the test of a relationship too. I think they talked about it as a movie. It's a De Niro movie, but I can't remember which one it is, where the kid's taking a girl out on a date, and they're like, look, you bring her to the car, you unlock her door, open her door, and let her in and close the door. If she doesn't reach over and unlock your door, then she's not worth your time. So and I went with that when I was younger. I was all like, yeah, I unlock her door, open it for her, close it after she's in her seat. She should lean over and unlock, because you used to have to pull the fucking thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that's how you know if somebody's worth a damn, if they think to do that after you open their door for them. Anyway, that's like old school car talk. It's never going to be a thing anymore. I don't know how you judge a person that you're dating. I'm sorry, kids. You're just going to have to
swipe right every time. Cast like wide net.
It's like if you go out with this girl and ask her what her favorite meme is, and if it's not a funny meme, then she's not worth your time.
Fussy men get fuck all. That's what I'm saying.
anyway, all right. That was Power Windows. We're on to number 10. We're now in the top 10. The 10 zone.
Cool. And with this being the top 10
Uh-huh.
of a almost 20 album discography,
Mhm.
we've entered the no wrong answers zone, really. Like, there's no wrong answers with Rush, really, but like
I'm gonna go
these
on record and
10,
say the only wrong answer is if you totally write off their 80s material. That's the only wrong
yeah.
answer. Other than
Mm-hmm.
that, to each their own.
Hell yeah. So, my number 10 is Farewell to Kings.
Okay, wow. What number 10 is
I
Farewell to
know,
Kings?
but when I
Okay.
look at the ones above it, I'm like,
I
it does make sense to me.
it no, it is. I understand. I mean, you've already I already know because this is here, I already know there's 80s Rush that's getting love from you. The fact that Farewell is at number 10. So I'm cool with this.
But yeah, like, that being said, its placement doesn't do its quality justice, because like a Farewell to Kings,
Mm-hmm.
quite a nice intro, builds into that easily identifiable Rush sound that they continue to develop.
Yeah.
Xanadu is a
Oh,
oh yeah, yeah, straight up. Like,
there is nothing that is like there are moments in songs where something kicks in and I'm just like, God damn it. And that's when there's do 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 bow do 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 do
yeah,
do 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 do.
yeah.
Once that part kicks in, I'm just like, holy shit, man. It's one of my favorite Rush songs.
Which makes it even more impressive that the meat of that song was done in one take.
Yeah.
How fucking insane is it that what is it, 11 minutes, a 10 or 11-minute song, like the at least the bass, drums, guitar, and fucking, it was all done in one take. Like, how well rehearsed do you have to be to get a full 10-minute song right in one take? Like,
Yeah. I
that's
mean,
incredible.
at this point, those guys were at the top of their game.
Yeah,
And I mean, really, like this is also, this is the one following 2112.
yeah,
And so there's, they have to have that fuck yeah momentum going on,
you're
of
right.
like we're not worried about, we now connected with people and the record company's happy with us now. So,
Yeah,
it's got to be a good feeling and it's got to help you be super creative, I would say.
definitely. Closer to the heart. Like,
That's a fucking classic.
I can hear a little bit of Queen in that song.
Yeah.
Like, I get a little bit of a Queen vibe. Cinderella Man, acoustic led ballad prog rocker. Madrigal is a mystical song with a cute little synth in there. Love that. Uh, and then like Cygnus X1, Book 1, The Voyage.
Yeah.
There's wow. Like, just simply put, fucking wow. How
Is
they
there
craft.
like in the Rush book of cool moments, in the top 10 has got to be Geddy's like screaming at the end of that song. It is
Yeah,
fantastic every time.
yeah. Like, my main critique of Farewell to Kings is from a production perspective. I find the production, at least from what I heard, it was pretty treble heavy. So that is probably why sonically, to me, I put albums above it from like a simple what do my ears like perspective.
Yeah.
But there is absolutely no taking away the absolute, as you said, top of their game musicianship on this fucking album, because my god,
Yeah.
dude, holy shit, I wouldn't even know where to begin, making something like Xanadu. Like,
No.
I can write pretty kick-ass 80s hard rock, but like, some of this stuff is like, are we sure they're like human? Like, did like some sort of like shuttle fucking crash land in Canada and they just shapeshifted into three dudes?
You know what? That's a conspiracy theory or something that I'm on board with.
Fun
They
fact: Neil Peart is an octopus. He just
Neil
moves
Neil
that
Neil
fucking
Peart.
fast.
Neil Peart.
Neil Peart. Sorry,
Not gonna
I fumbled my words there.
I'm one of those people that's so annoying when it comes to that. Like anytime I hear somebody say that, even if it's like on a video, I feel like I want to comment and be like, it's not pronounced that way.
No. Just like reach through the fucking screen and you just see your arm on the other side come out like that. But yeah,
like pert is an antiperspirant. It's not a name anyway.
I mean, he'd smell good.
It's true. Maybe he did use pert. Wouldn't that be awesome if like Neil Peart used pert and it was like a little
Peart's
joke
pert.
to himself? Because like everyone calls me pert, and I'm going to use this pert. This is the not funny.
So I don't smell like a furt.
That was absolutely not funny at all. I apologize for that. Usually I'm slightly funnier, not quite, but you know.
They can't all be zingers.
In our case, usually they're not. But you done with that with Farewell to Kings?
Great album. What can I say? What can I say, huh?
It's a fantastic album. So for my number 10, I'm going to move a few albums back from you. I really love this album. So now we're in the top 10. We're at the point where like, these are all, it's hard to find things that I don't like about these albums that could even explain my ranking. My number 10 is Fly By Night from 1975. Second Rush album, first album with Neil Peart. And
I'm gonna have to make an apology video for that.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Years ago, I called him Neil Peart because I heard everybody else saying it that way, and so like it was luck. It was just lucky enough for me to stumble across a video where Getty actually breaks it down to like that's where he says like it's like ear, but then a P and a T on either end of it, so it's Peart. And I'm like, thank you, Getty, for finally clearing that up. Because I don't think that Neil didn't seem like the kind of dude that would ever correct people. So, he just let them like, whatever, you call me Pert, whatever. Just don't call me late for dinner, Anyway, so yeah, Fly By Night. Like this, like listening to this after the first Rush album. So the first Rush album ends on a high because you have Working Man. But
yeah.
The first 30 seconds of Anthem, you're just like, they almost feel like a different band.
Yeah.
Like it's like everything finally came together and they became the band they were supposed to be. And it's interesting because I'm pretty sure that Anthem was something that they had already had written prior to Neil joining. And so the fact that it's that their brains were already in going a little more progressive and interesting and complicated, and that song that's an absolute Rush classic. Now Fly By Night it still holds on to some of that 70s rock vibe, but now the songs are like incredibly well written and they all have much better lyrics thanks to Neil. There's a couple that I think are still Getty lyrics on there as well, but they're all really strong songs. And this album, its strength is the strength that I say about a lot of second albums from bands, that it still maintains some of that rawness of them being a pretty young band respectively, but also the confidence of like we're on our journey already. And so many second albums have this great vibe, and Fly By Night has that sort of confident vibe. And the big thing for me on this album is obviously Bytor and the Snow Dog, which is the first time that they did like a longer proggy kind of song. And I love this song. It's one of my favorite Rush songs, and it's also one of my favorites to see them play live because they always seem to have so much fun playing this song. And it's a really good example of what I was saying, where you see them joking around with each other. This is a song where that always happens. And it's usually in that middle section where there's no vocals and they're usually like chasing each other around the stage or something like that. But anyway, I just think that's a fucking great song. And it's a huge step forward for Rush.
Major,
So
yeah.
yeah. So here's the thing with this album right now that I'll say that some people that aren't really that into this album, I almost feel like this is why. The first half of the album is just killer rock shit, ending with this big epic thing. Second
Hmm.
half of the album is almost entirely acoustic.
Yeah.
So, and even though you have Fly By Night, great song, um, it's interesting because it's the same sort of thing where when you're listening to this on vinyl, it somehow makes a lot more sense because
Yeah.
Vitor ends the first side, you flip it over, then you get this mellow vibe, but then when you get to in the end, the song starts off acoustically, but then the electric guitars kick in, and it almost makes absolute sense. Like, oh, they gave you this other little vibe, at times really mellow,
Mm.
and then in the end, it doesn't get like fully crazy rocky kind of shit, but it gets louder again, and for some reason, it makes it feel like a complete journey. Like it makes more sense than the sequencing for Caress of Steel to me. But I could
Yeah.
see why some people would be like, well, it's front loaded. But I'm like, well, it would seem front loaded to me if there wasn't such a divide between acoustic and electric right there.
Yeah.
So I think it was on purpose. Once again, Big Rush fans could probably confirm that it was on purpose, that it was sequenced that way. But overall, like it's like that's the only thing I could see that could be a fault of this album because every song is really good. And honestly, I do like that. I wish more bands would take chances with albums and do things like this song, it lasts an entire side, or this half of the album is this vibe and this other half is this vibe. Because sometimes an album really benefits from a variety of songs that play out throughout the album, but sometimes it's really nice to hear something where you get two distinct sides of a band. And I like that Fly By Night does that. But once again, they're competing with their own badass shit. So Fly By Night goes here at number 10.
Cool. Which, is an almost matchup because my number 9 is Fly By Night. So I'm going to hop straight off of what you were saying. Anthem, already ups the cerebral edge to Rush's sound ever so slightly. You can hear a bit more prog seeping in, even though it still has that 70s rock straight up kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
Best I Can, this song, however, still shows off that straight up hard rock route that they still have here. Beneath, Between, and Behind.
That's great.
It's back in the proggy zone. And then, like, I gotta do a full breakdown of By Tor and the Snow Dog. Like,
hell yeah.
At almost like 9 minutes, I have plenty to say about this. Like, Rush had an ear for big old compositions like early on, and they have the talent to back it up. And those big distorted bass barks are clever. Like, I'm pretty sure they're done with the bass, right?
In the middle of the song?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's bass.
Probably with some sort of like fuzz wah, like kind of Cliff Burton kind of thing. Even if they, at the start, you're like, the fuck is that? And it's like, oh, they're making like a dog sound with the bass. That's really cool. And you can't ignore how massive the jump in technicality is from the debut to this fucker. Like, right away. Like, Neil Peart was Peart. I caught myself. 5 second rule. 5 second rule.
Yeah.
Peart was a beast, man. Like, I'm also inclined to think that, the swelly bit in the second half of the song had to have influenced Cliff Burton when he made the intro to Damage Inc.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that Cliff Burton was a Rush fan. I think all of them were. So, and so it would make sense because that was the thing is that Cliff was a guy that, as much as people like to paint him as this guy who was just metal, he wasn't. He was into punk. He was into Southern rock. He was into prog. Like, he loved all of these different. He was into fucking radio songs.
Yeah, it's funny because like in like old photos. I know we're talking about Metallica on a Rush podcast, but like
Any time is a good time to talk about Metallica. Okay.
it's a good tangent because
Here's a connection though. They were both managed by the same management company, Rush and
Prime.
Metallica. Bam, there you go.
And like oh man, you look at like old promo shots of Metallica from like really early on, where everybody has the leather jacket and the denim and the skin tight denim jeans, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you've got fucking Cliff rocking the Canadian tuxedo with the flares, you know? And
Yeah.
it's like, you know, for those who don't know, the Canadian tuxedo is double denim, baby. Jeans and jean jacket. But yeah, it's funny because, you know, Cliff Burton is this icon of metal, but he probably knew more music than any of the band members at that time.
Yeah.
You know,
But he was also more. He seemed more open to other
yeah,
things than the other dudes probably were.
yeah.
So, but you know, it is what it
play,
is.
We can't play any slower than.
So, speaking of that, I'll
oh, you got it.
I'll bring this. You can't see it on the podcast side of things, but it's my Cliff Burton action figure.
That's fucking sick.
Yeah, it's fucking great. I just have it hanging by my desk, and Cliff always kind of looking over me. But
awesome,
but yeah, he has been painted as like this icon of like uncompromising metal, which I'm just you know that's we talked about this on the Metallica ranking where I said, look, if you know a lot about Metallica and Cliff Burton, you probably know that he probably would have been the one to push them towards being more direct and to the point and making shorter songs and slower songs. But that's not cool to think that way because plus he's not here to tell us that we're right or wrong. So everybody make your own assumptions. It's fine. But yeah, I guarantee you he was a fan of Rush and probably that particular moment you're talking about.
Cool. So yeah, that takes me to side 2 with, you know, obviously the title track, Fly By Night, tune. Making Memories is this like acoustic up tempo rock kind of one. Rivendell is a soothing acoustic track, and in the end is this majestic way to close out the record because again it hits you with that acoustic thing, and then the electrics come back and it's like a big whoosh ending. But yeah, this record expands on their sound while still having that 70s rock roots that they began with, but they're just, you can hear that they've doubled down on certain things but added so much more. So that's cool.
It's a great album. My number 9, this was one that I guarantee you is probably low on most people's lists. But the funny thing is that when I initially was breaking out the albums and like I feel like this will be my top 6 and blah blah blah, this one was in my top 6 just because I love it so much. But I had that problem with going through and listening to all the albums and going, oh fuck, okay, relatively speaking, it's not as good. Okay, I'll put it at number 9. But I love this album. My number 9 is Roll the Bones from 1991. I love this album. It's just a fucking solid, great album. I mean, from the beginning of Dreamline on, it's just fabulous. It's their 14th album. And we talked about this before where it's like 1991, but it still sounds very, very 80s to me. And you know, it does do the thing like I was referring to in the last episode, the middle of the road Rush thing. There's a lot of that here, sure, but the songwriting is so good on every song that it doesn't really matter. Like the standout moments aren't necessarily riffs or complicated, epic parts. It's just really catchy, well-written songs. And to me, it's a big step up from Presto. And with Presto, obviously they were like, okay, well, now we got to transition. We're transitioning out of the 80s era. And to me, Roll the Bones is closing the book on that era of Rush with an absolute classic. I think it's great. It's a great little last moment of coming out of the 80s. And yeah, I don't know. I really love this album. We talked about it a lot on the last one. I think that I watched so occasionally I watch our episodes because my number one thing is trying to figure out ways that we could improve. And usually I go, nah, we can't. How can you improve this? But the one thing I was like, man, we were on Roll the Bones for a long time, just talking about all random stuff. So I won't keep us on there for that long on this one, but I get it. If Roll the Bones is not the Rush sound you're wanting to go to, that makes sense to me. But if you are into it, this is a killer album. Like that's so that's what ends up making it so strong for me, is that as an album on its own, it's really, really good. And then all the rest of the Rush albums, like I said before, it just makes it to where I had to put a personal favorite at number 9, realizing that most of these albums are personal favorites. And so I think I just give this one a lot more love because I think it's underappreciated.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
It's just, it's the same thing to bring us back around to Metallica. It's the same reason why, if you would ask me, like, what's the Metallica album you've listened to the most over the past couple of years, I would say Saint Anger, because I really enjoy it. But at the same time, like, I'm like, this gets so much unnecessary hate. I almost want to, like, I know nobody knows I'm listening to it, but I'm just like, it's out in the air. Like, maybe something will hit the cosmos and come back down with some good vibes towards some underappreciated albums, but I don't know. But Roll the Bones is one of those.
Cool. So is that your
that's my number 9.
Number 9. Cool. So my number 8 is dun 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 dun.
Oh wow.
Dun dun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this album.
That synth sound at the very beginning is so good. And I don't and I know it's supposed, okay, it's 80s, whatever. I still hear it today and go, that sounds so cool.
Yeah.
Like if I had found that sound, I'd be like, I'm writing a whole goddamn album with this sound.
It's a great way to hype up an album. They couldn't have picked a better way to open this record, dude.
That's like, by the way, the album is
Signals,
yeah.
And it opens with Subdivisions, which is the song I am poorly replicating with my mouth sounds.
It's a fantastic song.
But yeah, it's a real majestic but it's also a very relatable track for anybody who's ever had trouble fitting in anywhere. It's
absolutely.
I myself can attest to that.
Be cool or be cast out.
Yeah, I mean, in high school, dweeb had like 3 people that fucking liked me, and now I could probably beat some of you in a fight. So.
I didn't. You know what? You know what? All of a sudden, Cranked and Ranked became the gun show. I don't know.
Yeah, it did.
Podcast listeners, Eddie Sparxx is flexing his man muscles.
Shredded.
He's
call me Shreddy Eddie.
He's working his way towards his ultimate goal to look like Stallone from the 80s.
And this is gonna come into it, because this is a good little segue, because I'm getting there. You get the Analog Kid, which is another awesome song. Yeah. Love the crazy whittly 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 band. Whittly whittly whittly. Like, that riff is so creative and so weird, but it kicks ass.
Yeah.
And then you get Chemistry. This makes me want to climb a mountain and fight Dolph Lundgren. Like, at the time of writing this, I'm very excited to hear the rest of their 80s catalog.
Yeah.
I was not disappointed because it delivered on exactly what I wanted. But
Yeah.
like, ah,
The
dude,
keys on that are also epic.
yeah,
Like it's very like it's
yeah.
big. It's big fucking keyboards.
Drago! Yeah. Oh, Digital Man, very. Now, I want to state this for the record, as I am a huge fan of the thing I'm about to say, but I know some uh, fans of this band I know would probably turn their nose up on what I'm about to say. Very Cora era Stone Temple Pilot guitar parts on this one, and
Okay. Yeah.
I'm very much into that. Like I love those
Yeah.
chorusy clean guitars. Uh, Another chef's kiss for Eddie's book of compositional stuff.
Coming soon from Brussels.
The weapon, very new wave synthage on this one. Like Geddy Lee even has an almost Duran Duran vocal sound on it. Like this would have been, early 80s. Everyone sings like this.
Fuck,
It
80,
has
fuck
like
80, 82 is like that's Duran Duran Central right there.
yeah,
It's like
exactly.
they were one of the
Yeah.
biggest groups at that point.
Man, like New World Man, big driving, vibey, chimey track. Losing It feels like a sci-fi folk song, really cool stuff. And Countdown, fuck yeah, big ass epic montage synth blended with Rush's majestic sound. This album is an album that I went into expecting good and got great.
Yeah.
And I love when that happens,
Yeah.
But yeah.
I
Yeah,
I
Signals
agree.
kicks
I agree
ass.
with everything you said. And take your shots, everybody. This is our first matchup of this episode. My number 8 is also Signals from
Yes.
1982. Their ninth album. I don't have anything to add really. Like fucking Subdivision is probably in my top 10 Rush songs.
Mm-hmm.
It is one of those songs that immediately makes me feel better. Like no matter what's going on, once the keys kick in with that main keyboard riff thing, I don't know what it is about it, but it really does. It does something for me. But yeah, obviously this is where the keyboard started to become a lot more prominent. And to me, this is the beginning of the second era of Rush, this album. Because obviously they kind of got a little more to the point with some of their songs with the previous two albums, but I almost feel like that was just kind of the tail of their journey through the 70s and out of the 70s. But I think that they finally got to that point where they're like, all right, we're in the present of the 80s now. It sounds 80s, but man, there's every song's fucking great. It is more concise than any album that they had done. I mean, I guess since Fly By Night, but even Fly By Night had one proggy type song on it. But it's just amazing songwriting and ideas. And this is one that when I was younger, I always felt like this was one that people hated on, but that seems to have gone away. I feel like this one gets a lot more respect now. And that's good because it's a great album. I have to admit, though, probably my least favorite Rush album cover because it's like, I mean, it's fine, but it's like for some reason, like every other album, I like what they went for a lot more than this one, and I don't know why. I don't know, but it is what it is. It's been the cover of the album for forever now. So it ends up going at number 8 just because of the fact that I guess the latter half of the album is slightly less awesome. I don't know. It's hard to figure it out. But it felt right that there's something that happens with 80s Rush where they solidify that this is where they're going, but the album after this, which we'll talk about later, something happens to where like everything just gets cool as fuck for an album. And so this one I went, okay, well, I'm gonna put this lands at number 8, and I feel good because it's in the top 10, but they did so much better than this, which is crazy that this album is that good and they did better than that. But yeah, that's also my number 8, which brings us to the last album of the second part of the Rush trilogy. I feel like we've been really focused for the most part in this episode, and that could be disappointing to some of you, and also a relief to others of you. but yeah, number 7.
Yeah. Let's dive on in. So my number 7 is Hemispheres.
Oh man, what did you? Okay.
Yeah, like I love this. Like
I stopped for a second to make sure. Did he just say Hemispheres? Okay.
Let's talk about it. Here's a little thing I put. Prog rock bands be like, I'm gonna put out an EP, but it's gonna be like the length of an LP because there's only technically 4 tracks on this album.
Yeah.
But like Cygnus X1 Book 2 Hemispheres, like they opened this record continuing right where the last one closed, and they did it with a 20-minute epic. And it's fucking awesome. Circumstances. This song is tasty. There's some turnarounds in there that are just pure, unfiltered awesome. The trees, like, goddamn, dude, this is like mega prog territory. Like,
yeah.
And there's also a mad vibey chorus bit, which is ace. And then finally you get La Villa Strangiato, which is this big old track. This one is almost 10 minutes in length. And this one's got a little sassy little reference in it to Powerhouse by Raymond Scott, which I recognized via watching a shit ton of Looney Tunes. I recently bought in the last few months the complete Looney Tunes Golden Collection box set, and I've just been gradually working my way through. And the amount of times you hear that like usually in a factory or some sort of building site or something kind of slapstick. But they do it like at a breakneck speed, where it's like, like, oh, love it. But again, it's one of their stranger track listings. But I feel like this one does right what Caress of Steel maybe didn't do right. I feel like they made a good decision here with like opening with a long one and closing out with a long one.
Yeah.
Rather than having, Circumstances, the trees, and then Cygnus Book
yeah.
and then La Villa Strangiato, because like relative time speaking, like you could fit like 5 songs into the first half of this album alone. Yeah.
And the
totally
thing,
worth it though.
And it's funny because I keep feeling like I want to speak to people who don't really listen to Rush, because you're talking about 4 songs. One of them is broken up and it has sections, but like it's not like modern day prog where this song is 14 minutes long. 7 minutes of it is the intro, which is this and some sprinklings of some things, and then finally the song starts and it's really only a 3-minute song with an outro. Like that's bullshit. Like Rush have their moments where they do have that proggy territory where things just get a little bit smooth for a minute, but that's a album that's packed full of great shit. So much so that sometimes I love that album, but I'll look like at the track listing and go, oh, that's all, that's it, that's all that's on there. Because it doesn't feel that way when you listen to it. It's got so much going on, and that's the mark of a fucking great band, in my opinion. That if you can have an album that, you know, track listing wise just has a few tracks on it, but yet it gives you like so much, you know, in what they do, then, you know, not a lot of people can do that, because a lot of people do what I referred to earlier, where there's a whole lot of fudging around and not really actually playing a song. So like there's a god damn it, what's the name of that band? I think it's Blood Incantation. Fucking hipster death metal band just put out an album of all moody keyboard stuff, not even songs. It's an entire album of like, it's the most band with their heads up their asses album I've ever fucking heard. And I know that like the hipsters were like, oh, it's an interesting choice that they made. This is really fascinating. You know, they've toyed around with some electronic things before. Now it's come full circle to where there's shut the fuck up. It's lazy, because you see like the pictures of the band, it's like 5 dudes and they're all like death metal, and I'm like, one dude played on that. Like there's no band. It's dumb. Like it should, like if it like, here's the only reason why how that album would be okay is if they send it to everybody for free. like the fucking vinyl. Like if you're gonna press a vinyl, it just gets mailed. Whoever previously bought your album, they get it for free, because you just get minimal fucking effort
to you physically. Like, oh, you have this album now. Like,
you know, it's just gonna be like that U2 album where it just shows up on everybody's iPhone and everybody's fucking pissed off. That's what's gonna happen. But anyway, that's what I'm talking about. Though that's what I'm talking about. Where like the idea of something becomes way more important than what actually is on the album. And if I you know that people are, I haven't bothered to go look or listen to any reviews of that, but I guarantee you there are people that are all like ready to go, this is fascinating stuff. And I'm just like, it's fucking not.
This is where we find out like one of the few people that actually bought merch is a member of Blood Incantation, and we just crushed them.
I'm sorry. I mean, even before I talked about this album, I called it hipster death metal, because that's what they fit into that mold of all these bands that are doing this same exact fucking sound, and it's all derivative and not as well written as the shit that they're fucking ripping off. And so it's just boring. I'm sure they're very nice dudes, but fucking get your own identity. Anyway, sorry. Rush does not do that. Rush never just fucking sticks their head so far up their ass that you can't hear a fucking song. So that's why they're great. All right, fine. Let's move on to my number 7. I was going to get a tangent in there somewhere, just so, you know, people get their money's worth for this free podcast. But yeah, don't worry. We're going to be pressing it on vinyl, and everyone can buy it for $40. Just this episode is just going to be, it's totally out of context. The other parts will not be released on vinyl, just this one. Anyway, okay. So, okay. Let's get this shit over with. My number 7. This one I also will put in the category of, oh, this will easily be in my top 6, and it makes it to number 7. That shows you how difficult this ranking was. My number 7 is Grace Under Pressure from 1984.
Good one.
It's a fucking fantastic album. It's their 10th album following Signals, so they're getting into the 80s here. But the weird thing here, so the only thing that I could say that's even a negative at all is that I wish the production had a little bit more weight to it. It's a little bit thin, but I don't care, because the only reason that ever sticks out is when you're doing things like this, when you're listening to albums like back to back and stuff. But you put this album on its own, and I've never thought that before. But in this context, I'm like, all right, maybe the production could have been a bit beefier. But like, every song on here is fucking killer. And the thing that I love about Grace Under Pressure is that it's sure it's in the 80s Rush era where a lot of people their brain immediately goes to keyboards. But the thing, and there are keyboards on this album, but the thing that's so interesting to me about this album is that so many parts of it have this really interesting sort of rhythmic quality that almost makes it seem like a post-punk album.
Yes.
Like, and that
Red Sector A.
There's just so many little parts where I go, this literally could have been one of those, suit and tie wearing bands from England, with their jangly guitars and stuff,
Are we the only human beings left alive? That'd be fucking sick.
But all the songs are so fucking good, and there's just such an interesting energy to this where it almost is like it's such a unique Rush album. Like just the overall vibe of it is so cool. And I put this one up there with like Roll the Bones as an album that like I don't hear enough people praise how fucking cool this album is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just it's easily a go-to Rush album for me, just because it is one of those I just see the cover and go, oh fuck, I just got to listen to this one. But eventually, like, now that we're here at the end of this second episode, and there are albums that are the classic go-to Rush albums that obviously are in our top 6. But when you really go through and listen to them, like, sure, some of those songs, a handful of those songs are, especially on, in America, I don't know about it in England, but they're very overplayed on rock radio, like all the time. But you take that aspect away and you comparing these albums, the ones that seem to have the biggest spotlight shown on them when it comes to Rush, like they deserve it. Like they're that fucking good.
Sometimes I'll never get bored of Tom Sawyer.
Yeah. And so like sometimes classic albums become classics just because some fancy journalists were just like, this is one of the best things ever made. And then people go, oh, it is. But then there are some that are classic albums that actually have substance and along with that, an entertaining quality all behind them. And so albums that I was like, oh, it's so kind of normal and basic to put this album in the top 6. Very quickly I went, fuck that. That's not at all the case. And so that's why Grace Under Pressure, an album that I love, ends up at number 7, because I'm just like, well, it has to top one of the episodes, so it's topping episode 2. But Rush just made so many fantastic albums, and they were lucky enough to be a band where they were able to evolve the way that they evolved, and then they developed a loyal audience, and that's fantastic to me. But Grace Under Pressure is like, what do they say? The kids say, don't sleep on this album. Because it would be uncomfortable, because it's there's no cushioning or pillows or anything. So, but
probably damage the album too.
But yeah, that's true. But Grace Under Pressure is like, it's clearly it's when it comes to this era of Rush, it's my favorite. It's just I could go on about it because it's just the vibe of it is so fucking cool. But yeah, it ends up being my number 7. You haven't even talked about that album yet, so that's clearly in your top 6. So that's nice.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, we're gonna have some sameness in the next episode, which is But to be fair, you already talked about Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres. So
my list was laid out in a way to give each era its fair shot at having a best album. So I managed to split the discography up into not 3 but 6 distinct sections.
Yeah,
where it's like first 3 70s albums have a hard rock vibe. the second 3 70s albums were very conceptual. The first 3 80s albums, they strip back a little bit. They write songs.
Yeah.
Synths come in a little bit more. Then you've got the synth albums. Then you've got the transition into the 90s albums. And then you've got, like, basically modern day after, Vapor Trails.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, not Vapor Trails. Test for Echo. I always get those fuckers mixed up, but
yeah.
I mean, I've got one from at least 5 of the 6. 5 of the 6 eras in there.
Yeah,
or
and
4.
I so clearly next episode we're going to be talking about albums that people have talked about ad nauseum, if that's the term. But we're going to do it in our own special way where we have weird tangents where who knows what the fuck we're going to be talking about, how to make a casserole or something. But yeah, that wraps up the second part of the Rush trilogy. And every time I think about trilogies and second parts of trilogies, I immediately think of Empire Strikes Back. I'm like, oh, we should like end this on like a downer, like something bad should happen. I'm going to cut off your hand and then tell you I'm your daddy. And then next episode, we're gonna have some fucking walking tiny bears walking around.
I feel like I just went through like a portal and I went to like a parallel world where the English language exists, but like it's completely different. So like all the words have different meanings.
I refuse to talk about Star Wars in the correct terms because I love those first 3 movies and I loved them my whole life. But now I'm on the other end where I'm gonna say things like laser swords and stuff like that. TIE fighters.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the end of this episode. Peanut butter platypus to those of you who stuck around. And the one thing that I love is that the last Rush episode, I got one of those comments that I just love getting where somebody says, not even a fan of this band, really loved this episode. And that is awesome.
Because like the mark.
I feel like that's the thing is there's a lot of podcasts out there that are so focused in on one thing. Like you listen to some of those ones that's just about Faith No More, one that's just about Metallica, or there's probably several that are just about Rush. But the fact that like we tackle all this different shit, it makes me happy that we're not just bumbling fools that just bore everybody to tears. I mean, I'm sure we bore some people to tears, but I mean, it just makes me feel better about like, oh, we've got a good thing going here because we talk about all these different things and we bring the same kind of enjoyment to groups that we're super jazzed about, some that we don't know quite as well, or one of us doesn't know quite as well. So it's cool to get those kind of comments. That being said, leave your comments if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you're listening to this like as a podcast, go to I don't know where you leave reviews and stuff on podcasts. I know you can do that on Apple Podcasts, but go leave some, go rate us and review us. And maybe eventually we'll gain more traction in the algorithm. And maybe one day somebody will come to us and say, hey, would you like to advertise for dishwashing liquid or Adam and Eve? Is that like a sex toy thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be cool because then we could like try them out and then like on an episode be like, did you try out this new thing? Let's do our section where we talk about the new sex toy.
Allow me to demonstrate.
That's when Cranked and Wanked.
There it is. Yeah. There it is.
Anyway, okay. All right. And on that note, let's get the fuck out of here. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Cranked and Wanked. We'll be back next week with the exciting conclusion of the Rush trilogy. And as usual, I'm going to throw it over to Eddie Sparxx or Mariah Carey to take us out.
Steven and Eddie. I'm doing a Boy Tour in the Snow Dog. Like later, dude. I can't fucking do Geddy Lee, man.
You sound more like King Diamond than you do.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Later, dude.